My grandmother signed every school permission slip with "Love you most" until I was 13. That was the year I found out what those words were covering up. My grandmother signed every school permission slip with "Love you most" until I was 13. That was the year I found out what those words were covering up. My parents died when I was 3, and my grandmother took me in without hesitation. She came to every parent event alone. The kindergarten concert where I sang off-key. The science fair where my volcano didn't erupt. The awards ceremony where other kids had multiple adults cheering, and I had her, front row, clapping harder than anyone. I loved her completely, until I learned to be embarrassed by her. She packed lunches in wax paper instead of plastic bags, made me write thank you notes by hand, wouldn't let me have a phone until 8th grade, and even then it was a flip phone that made kids stare. Other grandparents had iPads and knew about TikTok and said, "No worries," instead of "Mind your manners." Then Aunt Liza came back when I turned 13, my mom's younger sister who'd been traveling for 10 years. She rented an apartment nearby, and suddenly I had someone who understood me. She took me to concerts, let me try her makeup, talked to me like an adult. "Your grandma means well," she'd say, "but she's stuck in 1970. I started measuring my grandmother against her, pointing out every outdated opinion. I told my friends my grandma was traditional in a way that made them understand I was apologizing for her. I let Aunt Liza's observations calcify into something I called my own perspective. When I was 15, my grandmother asked if I wanted to go through my mom's old things in the attic. I said I was busy. Aunt Liza took me shopping that weekend, and I posted pictures of us laughing. The summer I turned 16, my grandmother had a stroke. Small, the doctor said. She came home with a cane and instructions to rest. Aunt Liza suggested maybe it was time to think about my grandmother moving somewhere with more support. "You're almost grown," she said. "You shouldn't have to worry about taking care of her." I didn't disagree out loud. 2 months before my 17th birthday, my grandmother left an envelope on my desk. Inside was a card with a check and a handwritten letter. She said she knew things had changed between us and understood if I needed space. She'd always be there if I needed her, but she wouldn't push. She ended with, "Love you most." I showed it to Aunt Liza. She sighed. "She's trying to make you feel guilty." Classic manipulation. I put the card in my drawer. My 17th birthday morning, I found my grandmother in the kitchen at 5 a.m. baking. Not a cake. 3 different cakes because she couldn't remember which flavor I'd liked best. The kitchen was covered in flour. Her hands were shaking, her cane propped against the counter. I watched her from the doorway without her knowing. She was humming the same song from when she made my lunches. She'd written "Happy Birthday" on each cake in careful frosting letters. One was smeared where her hand had slipped, and she was trying to fix it with a butter knife, squinting without her glasses. She looked so small. So tired. But there at 5 a.m. trying to remember my favorite cake while I'd spent 2 years trying to forget she was the only parent I'd ever known. I walked in. She startled, then smiled cautiously. "I know you have plans with Liza," she said. "I just wanted you to have something from home." I hugged her before she could say anything else. Not a quick hug, the kind where you're making up for 2 years of distance. She smelled like vanilla and flour, and the same soap she'd used my entire life. And I realized I'd been trying to scrub that familiarity away because Aunt Liza made it seem provincial. After she went to rest, I called Aunt Liza, asked why she never came around when I was little. She was quiet. Then said our grandmother had been controlling after my mom died, and Liza needed space from that pain. I asked if my grandmother had actually been controlling, or if Liza just disagreed with her. Another pause. "It's complicated." That was the first time her answer sounded like an answer. I canceled my dinner plans, spent my birthday with my grandmother eating 3 different cakes, and going through my mom's things in the attic. In a box, I found all my permission slips from kindergarten through 6th grade, every single one signed, "Love you most."